Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Randy Lewis, who is the former Senior Vice President of Supply Chain Logistics at Walgreens and the author of the upcoming book, No Greatness Without Goodness. And we're going to talk a little bit about, the book and talk a little bit about Randy's view about the industry. But before we do that, I just want to, remind everyone joining us today that part of our goal here at Talking Logistics is to enable you, the audience, to engage with our guests. So if you've got a question for Randy as we're going along the way here, you can submit it via the submit a question button or via the chat feature. And any good questions that come in, I'll go ahead and try to weave them into the conversation. If you are joining us as a guest, you will have to register first before you're able to ask a question. So with that, Randy, welcome to the program.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Great. Well, before we kind of, talk about the book and kind of get your thoughts on kind of some of the industry trends and your experience in the industry, I always like to ask my guests, how they got involved in the supply chain logistics industry. It's rare that you find, a high school student or let alone a college student that says, I want to be a supply chain professional when I grow up. And so what I find is a lot of executives kind of fall into, the supply chain logistics field. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your career path, how you got started in the industry, and obviously your time at Walgreens, and kind of where you are today and what your focus is moving forward.
Great. Well, I would say I fall into that category that you find most often. I would say I got here via pure serendipity. I went to college, got my degree in accounting, not because I loved accounting, but because my freshman year I had a great accounting professor. So I thought if I could be like him, be an accounting major. After I finished that degree, long about my junior year, I decided I wanted to go to the Peace Corps. I was going to be 21 years old. I wasn't ready to go into the workforce. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to learn Spanish. So I went to Peru for 2 years. I came back. I got another undergraduate degree. I only had to go a semester because of having a previous degree. I raised my grades sufficiently enough and threw myself on the mercy of the grad school admissions board. And they let me into business school, and I got an MBA. From there, I went to work in the consulting division of Arthur Anderson at the time, Anderson Consulting Accenture. And I decided I wanted to do that. I went on 3 interviews. I went up to Chicago to the Continental Illinois Bank up there. Then I went to Chase Manhattan, and I went to Arthur Anderson as I was mulling over the decision which I wanted to be a banker or a consultant. Arthur Anderson. That was the one. So after doing that, I worked there for 12 years in Chicago. Practice. Working with lots of different industries. Some of those distribution. Burlington Northern Railroad. I got railroading. But I wouldn't say I was a logistics guy, supply chain guy. Then one of my engagements, Ernst & Young was at Walgreens. And I headed up to redo all their supply chain systems. And I was there 5 years. At the end of that 5 years, I never considered working for a client. Sort of had the attitude anybody that would want to hire me, kind of like Groucho Marx, any club that would let him in, he wouldn't want. Not any client that would. So 20 years later, 16 years after leading the division, I retired. So there I am today, 120 days into
Great, great, great career path there, and kind of interesting journey in how you got to where you are. I don't know if this is just me or the other guests are experiencing too, but you were breaking up a little bit on the audio. I'm going to ask you to just take off the earpiece, and I think that might work. That might work best after all.
Okay.
Yep, I think that will work a little bit better.
We don't have to start over, do we?
No, we don't. No, we don't. I was able to hear you okay, so that would be fine. So,
All right.
let's you talked a little bit about your time at Walgreens, and you've been like I mentioned at the beginning, you worked there for 20 plus years. As you look back across kind of your career, I mean, what have been some of the biggest changes you've seen in the industry, and what has surprised you the most?
Well, I'm thinking through that. I think this is one industry or one area of industry that has really changed dramatically, I think, in the last 20 years. Just for example, just the titles. Back when I started, the person who had my job was the senior vice president of distribution and transportation. Then in the 90s, that became, everybody started calling that the head of logistics. And Justin, nobody knew what really logistics meant, but it sounded good. And then in this last decade, all of a sudden, when people were starting to understand logistics, it became supply chain. And I think to somewhat the complexity of the title relates to the complexity of the job. I think I think the scale of supply chain today and scale of logistics networks and how we move stuff around is so different today than it was 20 years ago. And it's different than it was 10 years ago. And I suspect that's not going to slow down. Scale is one thing, complexity is another. Uh, there's been a huge increase in risk and flexibility in supply chain. For instance, more outsourcing than ever, different types of collaboration and partnerships. Collaboration is probably the watchword in supply chain today, to be able to kind of mutually, instead of viewing yourself as one player, is realizing it is a system, it is a biosphere working together. And then I think the other piece has been technology. Technology, as far as the information we have or that we don't have, the analytics around it, the automation and the cost of automation has gone way down. I think this is probably pretty exciting times to be in supply chain.
One of the big changes that a lot of people are talking today, particularly in the retail industry, is this whole omni-channel retailing. Where consumers have a lot more information these days. They're buying over the web, and now you're seeing retailers, looking at their stores as fulfillment centers, experimenting with those kind of models. Just kind of your thoughts on this whole omni-channel retailing and kind of the evolution, if you will, of looking at stores as potential fulfillment centers and kind of what's that going to mean moving forward in terms of how folks manage distribution and fulfillment processes moving forward. Or do you have a counter view that maybe that's not a viable model?
Well, when you talk about fulfillment center, you're talking about for home delivery.
For home delivery or online delivery. I mean, you're seeing some retailers out there that are fulfilling online orders by having store associates pick line items and ship from stores. At least they're experimenting with that.
It's well, I know at Walgreens we had a lot of experience in that, and that was usually between 1901 and 1930 when people would call up and we would deliver it to the house. So it's what goes around will come around in that degree. Uh, as far the final mile in the home delivery, first of all, the internet's it's a huge thing, and I think that's the one thing that about that any technology. I remember when it came out, everybody wanted to be first mover advantage, and we were slow, and thank goodness we were because we could have really spent some money in that first round. Technologies tend to be overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. And we're not in the long run yet with the internet. It's got a lot more to do. I mean, you can look back at the UPC when that first came out. That was really so you could check out faster, and that was the belief that instead of everybody having to know all the prices at the cash register in a grocery store, that would make that a lot faster. Who would have thought that that would be controlling inventory and all the things we do now with UPC and then all the other things we do with symbology. So the question is retail going to be a fulfillment center? Is it going to be for home delivery? Yes and no. I think for certain things, high value items where people are willing to wait a little bit, or it's a where I really want to shop around. I think Best Buy is a perfect example. They're that in that sector. Will they do that for toothpaste? I don't know. It still surprises me how many of our customers order toothpaste via mail when we try to work with being in a mile from their house. So I still think some customers, when they want it now. I think some people like to shop. For example, when we look at our customers, we find a customer, it's not always one type of customer. Sometimes we're looking for one item, you and I. We go into a store, I know what I want. It's a destination shop. Sometimes we have time and we're a browse shopper. We're looking for interesting things. We're using that as part of the gathering experience. So I think retail is always going to have a role in that. There's going to be a lot of money spent in between now and how all that works out across all the merchandise categories we're talking about. Do I think drugstores will be one of the last ones, because certain things in drugstores, when I want my toothpaste, I need toothpaste now. And but I can wait for my LED TV. So I think it's going to be good. It's going to, from a inventory planning perspective, I think it's good and bad, because nice thing is about we're going to have a lot more information about our customers and our order frequency. I think the supply chain channels will be a lot better. I think there's going to be more cooperation. We may not source everything, even internally. I think there's going to be more room for third parties in that. But the consumer is ultimately going to decide on what's the value proposition that the retailer offers.
Great, great insight there, and I think you're right. I think it's interesting to kind of look at past examples like the UPC label and see what happened there, and kind of
the early adopter. One thing about the last mile. You remember Webvan?
Oh yeah.
The road, millions of dollars been lost on being maybe too early at the time. They were going to corner the last mile. I think that's kind of like cornering the gold market. I don't think anybody's going to be able to do that. But we'll keep trying.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about the book now. I know when you and I first talked, and you mentioned the title of the book, "No Greatness Without Goodness." I immediately loved the title, but what does it mean exactly? And what are some of the stories and kind of key takeaways that you're looking to communicate to the readers of this book once it's finished and published?
About 10 years ago, we had to first of all, when I started, we had like 1,700 stores. When I retired, we had 8,000. So I was fortunate to be there during a time of great growth, and all these things were happening about technology and automation and lots of alternatives on supply chain. And I got to build 20 distribution centers. The last 4 or 5, we have built them very automated. And in about 2002, we were going to build even a new generation, and we thought, we always make automation, try to make it more interesting for typically abled people, for us. And so why don't we use it this time? Don't give up anything on the efficiency, but maybe we can tweak it in such a way that we could enable people who may have never had a job before, people with disabilities like autism or cerebral palsy or the range of disabilities. We didn't really know what we were specifically planning, but we started down that path, and we set a goal in one center to hire 1/3 of the people with disabilities, which we did. And we opened another building like that 2 years later, and that became 50% people with disabilities. And these became the 2 most efficient centers in the history of our company. And then we realized it wasn't about technology, so we started rolling it out across all 20 centers in the United States. And now 10% of our workforce in our distribution centers are people with disabilities. And they've just changed the goal to 20%. So the no greatness without goodness came across as an idea. We realized that so many times, and it's so many times we kind of say, well, we have to worry about we want return on investment, or we're talking about doing something good in the community. And what we found is that's not an either or question. That can be an and question. And sometimes in our roles, each of us underestimate our power to impact the environment and the community around us in a positive way. And I think even today, more than in past years, one of the changes that's come about, everybody keeps talking about the only purpose of business is to make money. The purpose of the business is to make money, but it also has a huge impact on the world around us and the communities we serve. So the point that we learn, and I want to share, is that we can make a difference and look at where we are. You don't have to go outside. You don't have to go to Peru or Ecuador or Africa to do good. We have a tremendous amount of power to affect the world around us. And one of the things we learned was people want to do those things. If you let people aim high and take away the fear, they will do astounding things. I didn't do really anything except ask the people to set a high goal. How far could we aspire to? And oh, by the way, it's an aspiration, not something we're going to hammer people over the head with. If we really got behind it, how high could we go? And to take the fear away, because I knew and they knew we'd make mistakes. And they've done incredible things. And I see that over and over again.
Yeah, that's a great overview there, and I'm kind of wondering if we kind of see a similar type of thing going on with kind of sustainability in these days, where trying to kind of do right for the business, but also do it the and do also right for the communities that companies work in, the environment, so on and so forth. And I'm wondering, do you think part of that is kind of this new generation of workers that perhaps are entering the workforce that are kind of are looking at the role of business in a broader way, perhaps? Do you think that has some impact in this? I mean, it's an opportunity for future generations of workers and leaders that are probably maybe better positioned to pursue greatness with goodness?
Um, I don't think it's generational. I think it's something that's always been there. I think it's the comfort level of leadership. When people get more comfortable, they will tend to do things. I think everybody knows the right thing to do. I mean, we had a meeting the other day with the CEO of Unilever, who's a Belgian. He's not a young guy, and they've done tremendous things in the green area and sustainability. And he tells a story. Somebody asked him, so what's the return on investment on this? And he says, it's clearly the right thing to do. Why wouldn't we do it for that reason? Which is a pretty simple answer, and it's kind of the reason we did it. And it was the first time I've heard an executive quote Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning in a speech. And I told him later, I said, you had me at Viktor Frankl, because I'd never heard that used in a speech. So I think it's not, I think that certainly when I look at my children and being millennials, they care about that. They're different than baby boomers or Generation X or Y. But I don't think we have to turn around and wait for the young to come up. It's the people in all positions of power, top leadership, all the way down can have an impact.
Kind of related question to this, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, but you gave testimony to U.S. Senate back in March of 2011, kind of sharing your lessons learned and experience at Walgreens around your initiatives that you just talked about. And one of the things that I suspect you kind of addressed this in the book, one of the things you talked about, one of the biggest challenges the company faced was making the decision to move forward despite all the unknowns. Just to quote a little bit from your testimony here, you said, "Nobody wants to be blamed for good intentions with faulty outcomes. We knew that if we had to answer every what if before proceeding, we would never get started." So, you hear a lot of, kind of the cliche being analysis paralysis. Um, it looks like Randy, Randy, you there?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
It looked at my end that you were had disconnected there for a second. But let me just quickly ask the question. So, this analysis paralysis is kind of what you hear a lot about that affects a lot of companies. So, how do you overcome this the kind of fear of the unknown? And what advice would you give to companies that face similar opportunities and unknowns?
Well, I think the risk is around the potential prize. It was easy for us when we thought about, gee whiz, what if this, what if we didn't do it because we were afraid of the unknown? And we knew that we would make mistakes. But our attitude was, in any endeavor, we make mistakes. There is no certain thing in any enterprise. We think we control it, but how many projects have blown up? I mean, we always find out, it's like the U.S. Army says, the enemy gets to vote on your battle plan. Well, bad luck gets to vote on every plan. So it depends on how much risk you're ready to go after, but on the other side, what kind of game are you looking at? Now, in our case, we knew that we'd make mistakes, and we kind of looked at it, so we make mistakes all the time. What do we do then? Well, everybody knows, well, we assess, we make judgments, we make a change or not, and we proceed. We'll do the same thing here. The point is, on this one, this was such a prize, everybody wanted it to succeed. And I think as leaders, when that happens, the leader has got to take away the fear. You can't, there's two lines in the movie Apollo 13 that Gene Kranz says, who runs the flight center in NASA. One of them, a lot of people remember, is called, he says, failure is not an option. That's when everything's looking bad. They don't know if they're going to be able to get Tom Hanks, which is Jim Lovell and his crew back. Failure is not an option. If leaders say that, nothing will ever happen. It will be analysis by paralysis or analysis by consultant. So that's one way you can mitigate it. You call in a consultant and pay them to tell you to do it or not. But the bigger line in that movie, which I think is the most inspirational line, somebody comes up to him and says, "This is going to be a disaster if this happens." And he says, "On the contrary, I believe this will be our finest hour." A leader who takes away fear will have lots of people sign up and follow and do great things. And at the same time, the leader's got to take responsibility and provide the cover for them. If people know that somebody's in their corner, they will do miracles.
Great, great points. Yeah, I got a few more questions, but I'm going to just quickly remind those attending that if you do have a question for Randy as we kind of come near the end here of our conversation, go ahead and submit it via submit a question button or the live chat feature. I just want to touch upon a couple of things going back to kind of the role of technology and people, because we see a lot of commentary these days about there being a shortage of talent, or there being a kind of a need for talent at the distribution center stores, turnover rates, so on and so forth. On the one hand, you see kind of companies implementing a lot of automation and robotics into the distribution centers these days. What do you see as the role of people and talent as technology continues to kind of be put into distribution centers and automate a lot of continue the automation trend that's going on there.
Well, I think there's not as many people digging ditches today as there were 50 years ago either. So I think a lot of the tasks that can be automated will be automated. I think the lights out distribution center is a potential today. But oh, by the way, all the people that have to maintain that is going to be a lot more than what it used to be. That was the one thing we did. We added automation. We saved a lot of direct labor hours, but we added a lot of uh, higher cost hours, although not in many numbers, absolute numbers of people, to manage that. I think management in a distribution center today compared to 20 years ago has to know a lot more things. I remember seeing resumes where somebody said, well, I know Excel, and that was considered being computer literate. I think the demands on frontline management and on management in general are much more demanding and broad and complex. Analytics behind it. I think used to, when somebody would study supply chain, which it wasn't called supply chain back then, they would be studying transportation. Well, supply chain includes inventory now, and understanding the whole process, soup to nuts. That's what's going to be demanded of people who go in this field here on out. It's going to be about process. It's going to be about analytics. It's going to be about data and the persons that can use it best. That combined with all the people and leadership skills, that's why I think this field is wide open for smart, devoted people who want to make a difference.
Great. So let's kind of turn to your kind of crystal ball here, and as you look out into the future, kind of what excites you the most about what's happening in supply chain and logistics field, and maybe what concerns you the most as a flip side to that.
Well, the one thing about everybody worries about this country. I think this is not 1950 anymore. I think we do live in a global community. I think the collaboration is just a part of business. I think we'll become more global. I think companies will go get talent from around the world. We used to think that, oh, the people that had to worry about jobs were those poor people on the line in factories, and it was their problem. Well, guess what? That's everybody's problem. Everybody's competing with somebody around the world today. I think that's going to be disruptive. I think I don't know if people saying they're going to stay 3 years at a job on the average, which certainly wasn't the norm when I started my career, but seems to be a trend that people are declaring. I don't know what the impact that's going to have on the effectiveness of business, on the disruption of people's lives, impact on the family. I think it's all part of this whole societal change that we're going through. I don't know how that's going to shake out. I know it'll be different. From a business side, I think it will be exciting. From an intellectual side, it will be exciting. From an emotional side, I think that will be a challenge. How do people maintain some stability in their lives? What can they stay true to? I think that's a people issue more than it is a technical issue. I think, but again, with that comes opportunities. I think what's going to happen, what we're seeing happen in supply chain, as we see in politics across the world, between countries, nations, it's part of something bigger. But all in all, as a profession, it's an exciting time.
Any thoughts on, as you look at on the technology side, a lot of discussion these days on the role of mobile technologies, a lot of discussion on the role of potential role of social media or social networking, and using that in a business environment. We're certainly in the early stages there. Any thoughts or opinions on kind of how mobile and social networking might play a role in supply chain processes?
Well, I think we're already seeing that. It's obvious. I mean, why would anybody build a website? It used to they would approach mobile, oh, okay, we may have to do something mobile. Today, if you're building a website, you ought to start with mobile. And the last thing you think about is what's going to be on the home computer. Everything is going to be mobile. I think that's already here. The social aspects, the linkages. Just go out to LinkedIn and see how many people are out there and what they're doing. There's more forums out there. You can be in Google Circles, you can be in Facebook, you can be in LinkedIn. You've got so many answers out there. So keeping stuff proprietary. If you trying to do things on your own, there's so much out there as far as exchange of information, collaboration, uh, and wasting time. I mean, all the good and all the bad with that. I think there's going to be more and more, not less and less. And as companies think they can control it, that's been proven wrong over and over and over again. It's here to stay. What was going to be private, that's going to be an issue that people always will deal with. But what my children consider private versus what I consider private, it's a world of difference. And guess what? They're going to win.
Right. Great, great observations there. So, kind of wrap up. I always like to ask my guests, what are the audiences that we like to reach out to with Talking Logistics is, students and young professionals. So, I always like to ask my guests, especially experienced executives such as yourselves, what kind of advice would you give to students and young professionals, to help them pave a successful career path as they're, just beginning to start their careers here and kind of help, what should they be doing today to help them be more successful leaders in this industry down the road?
Well, if somebody's thinking about studying logistics, if they're on the front end, I think analytics and IT are the name of the game. The different technologies, whether it be in transportation or inventory, they're going to keep changing. Models and algorithms are going to keep changing, but just being comfortable with knowing around data. But somebody that's in their career in the supply chain. What I tried to do in first of my career is everybody wants to be a boss. I wanted to be a boss. It was always a great thing to go into your interview and say, okay, where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, I want to be your boss, or I want to be president. That was a popular thing to say. I can't imagine somebody saying that today. I think the best thing to do is to do a great job in the jobs that you're given. Your work can speak for you a lot louder than you can for yourself. And to look for meaningful work and how to make your job bigger by expanding what you're currently doing, not trying to go do somebody else's job necessarily. As leaders, we are always looking for people who can do more. And by the way, and people who can figure out how to do more on their own and surprise us. Those are the ones who always tend to get ahead. Don't demand it from me. Do something marvelous, and I will be astounded with what you do. I see when I would go into a presentation or look at somebody's come up with an idea that would blow me away. If I have to spend all my time trying to figure out great projects for people to work on, there's not enough time in the world. If they can do that, I want them to get them in a leadership position.
Great advice there, Randy. So, Randy, we're kind of out of time here today. We didn't get any questions today, but certainly any of you listening in, if you want to ask Randy a question, you can, after the fact, or if you're watching this program on demand, you can go to the website, talkinglogistics.com, find this episode, and you can submit a question there, and I'm sure Randy will be happy to answer it after the fact. So, Randy, getting back to the book real quick, when can we expect to see the book published? And certainly, I'm sure many folks will be looking forward to reading it.
It comes out in April, and I'm excited about it. I hope it's helpful to people. That's the reason I wrote it.
Absolutely. So we certainly look forward to that, and certainly look forward to reading it. So again, I want to thank you, Randy, for joining us today, taking time out of your schedule to participate. I want to thank everybody who joined us today as well. And like I say every week, make sure to tune in every Thursday at noon Eastern, where we have some great guests like Randy, where we talk about leading trends and happenings in the supply chain logistics industry. So with that, Randy, thank you again, and look forward to seeing you all in a future episode. Thank you very much.